Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Courtside with Beilinson Tennis, part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. It is an absolute privilege to have with us the creator of the Holding Court podcast, where this guest has had on my co-host and Hall of Famer, Steve Flink. So Steve and I definitely wanted to have him on our pod. You've heard him for now 25 years on ESPN. He's also been on CNN. What a privilege for us to have him on our pod. Please welcome in Mr. Patrick McEnroe. Patrick, thanks for coming on.
Thank you guys for having me. It's a pleasure to be on with you both. And I guess since I had Steve on my pod, David, at some point, I'm going to have to reel you in. So, get ready.
It'd be an absolute honor. Hey, I wanted to touch base with you. I know you were in the latter, some of the latter stages of Indian Wells. Great performance by the Americans. Before we do that, I still want to get, everyone's still digesting the information with Ash Barty. I'm going to ask you for your thoughts, and then I'll go to Steve. World number one, won 3 slams, as recent the Australian Open, closest to her home. Only 25 years old. She's done this before, about 8 years ago. Amazing champion, and by all accounts, even a more amazing individual. What was your initial reaction when you heard the news?
I guess David and Steve, I was surprised, but I can't say in all honesty that I was shocked. Only, I don't know Ashley Barty personally, other than just obviously watching her dominate as she did at the Australian Open and kind of see the way she handles the press and, being a big time player. And it's always struck me that there's certain things about I'm not just going to say tennis, but maybe the tour that she wasn't maybe enamored with. I could tell she didn't really like to talk to the press that much. She sort of knew it was an obligation. And, as much as great a player as she is, and she's clearly one of the great shot makers that we've seen in a long time in women's tennis, the ability to do a lot of different things, which is unusual to see. I'm not sure she has that passion for tennis that you need I guess to have a really long career and, to just love to be out there. And obviously, she has a lot of other interests, which is great. She played cricket. You mentioned when she quit tennis a couple of years ago when she was 17, became a pretty good cricket player. I'm told she's an excellent golfer. So there's rumors, maybe she'll try to go on the golf tour, but Renee Stubbs, who works with us at ESPN, who knows her very well. We have a group text we have on ESPN with everybody. And, she said, she's just a girl that just likes to be home. She's a little bit of a homebody. She likes to hang out with her friends. Obviously, she's getting married. Maybe she wants to have a big family, and it's easier if you're Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic, or Andy Murray to have multiple children. Not easy, I should say, but more possible than if you're a woman. So maybe that played into it as well. But the other first thing I thought, and then I'm very interested to hear Steve's take on it, is the first thing I thought, David, was she'll be back in 2 years, maybe 3 years, if she takes a break. So I don't know. I don't think she knows, to be honest. But she sure has been a pleasure to watch with the way she plays. And yes, she won the French Open a couple of years ago. Then she won Wimbledon, which she said was her life dream. But she dominated the Australian Open. I mean,
that was Steffi Graf-like, Patrick. I mentioned that to Steve. That was Steffi Graf-like running through a slam.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, when you see the way she dominated that and you thought, okay, like we may legitimately have a number one player that can actually stay there in women's tennis. We haven't had that since Serena was at the top. They've all sort of come and gone. So, Andy Murray, I thought, summed it up perfectly. Great for Ashley Barty, a bummer for tennis, because tennis is going to miss her. But if this is what she wants, then more power to her.
Steve, what was your initial reaction? I know we chatted briefly about it, but now that you've had a couple of days to digest it a little bit, what are your thoughts?
Well, just getting back to what Patrick just said, it crossed my mind too. Maybe this is not the end. Maybe we will see her again. But oddly, I'm really conflicted on that, because another part of me says no. She's probably partially for the reasons Patrick cited, and she has she's got a different kind of mentality than a lot of the other champions. And I feel like maybe this whole COVID thing got to her in ways, and she had to be away from home for so long. And my sense, Patrick, was that the family, that's really what's on her mind. Now, that doesn't mean she couldn't have her first child and come back and play a few more years as well. But I got a feeling that's sort of foremost on her mind right now, even though she hasn't announced that. But it is a loss for women's tennis. I wanted to see her round out her record with the US Open, maybe add another French or two, add another Wimbledon, and defend the Australian. She could have really put herself into a different category among the great women players in the modern era. Perhaps we're not going to get the chance to see that now, but I do admire her because she's an individual to the hilt. Don't you agree, Patrick? I mean, it took some guts to do this, and I believe that she thought it through.
Yeah, I mean, she said, one of the things she said in her press conference that she gave after her announcement was that she's always trusted her gut. In her gut, she feels like this is the right decision. She did sort of say, the door is closed, but it's not locked. So she's sort of giving people hope, and obviously for the Australian fans, I mean, they had their biggest ratings ever for the tournament this year. Of course, we had the controversy with Novak Djokovic leading into the tournament. In some ways, maybe that took a little pressure off of her going into the tournament. But boy, I mean, she just, as you said, David, she just rolled through the tournament. For the Australians to have their own champion, and she's a good old Aussie. You know what I mean? I mean, Leighton Hewitt always had sort of a love-hate thing with the Australian public. He wasn't that typical type of Aussie attitude out there, at least sportsmanship. He rubbed people the wrong way. Kyrgios, obviously, we know what he does. But Ashley Barty had all the qualities of a classical tennis player, in the modern era, which is unusual, number one. And then she also did it, the Aussie way, the old school Aussie way, always giving recognition to her team, always being a good sport, always behaving perfectly on the court, a great doubles player. You'll love to play doubles. I mean, that's how she made her mark initially on the tour. So there's so many things about her that it was like the Australians were like, wow, this is going to be amazing for the next 5-7 years at the Australian Open. The men's game has always been huge down there, but now we have this top female player to follow. So I'm sure the networks down in Australia are a little bit bummed about her announcing this retirement after what she did at this year's tournament was just phenomenal to watch.
Yeah, it was. And well said by both of you. And I know we have you on, we got a lot to get into, but before we start talking about your journey, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask what you thought of the Americans at Indian Wells. I mean, Steve and I just had our Indian Wells recap episode. 7 Americans in round 3. You almost had 9 because Sock was up 5-3 in the first set tiebreaker, and the third set tiebreaker against Tsitsipas. You had the Sebi Korda versus Rafa match up 5-3, 2 breaks. The Americans had their footprints all over that tournament, obviously led by Taylor Fritz. We're going to get into those group of guys because you have some deep history with those guys. You have to be thrilled with where we're at right now.
Well, like you said, I ran player development for a number of years when a lot of those guys were coming up and they were young teenagers. So it was always our mission to try to develop like a really good group of players and, continue that over the years. Obviously, a lot of this is luck. I mean, we all know that. And if you want to create a great player, it probably doesn't have a lot to do with any federation or any coaching system. It's mostly about, the greatness of that player and their own personal drive. But in saying that, I think we set up something that helped these players, as youngsters coming up. And as you said, they've helped each other more than anything. You talk about Taylor Fritz, you talk about Tommy Paul, Riley Opelka, Francis Tiafoe, and now you've got these couple of slightly younger guys coming up in Korda and Brooksby who are excellent players. So I think between, those 5-6 guys, there's a couple of them that I think can get to the top. Can they be number 1? I'd be surprised with that, but I think there's a chance that definitely more than a chance you can see them in the final weekend of a major, semifinals or better. I wouldn't put him as a lock to win a major. Like Alcaraz, like to me, he's a lock. Like he's going to win multiple majors. He's going to be, I think, the next great male player in tennis, at least that I've seen thus far. but the Americans have, this is the most options we've had in this country on the men's side for a long time. You talk about Sock, obviously came along sort of on his own. Ryan Harrison had a good run there for a couple of years. He's fallen off. But when you've got this group of 4 or 5 guys the same age, then you've got, these next 2 guys coming right behind them. So I think there's a real shot that we're going to have some players competing for big tournaments for the next decade.
I think, and I'll ask Steve this, I think even the most exciting part about it is all those guys that you just mentioned, Patrick, there's still room for them to get better, which is great news, right, Steve?
Oh, they're going to get immeasurably better. It's interesting, Patrick, that I feel maybe I'm even a little bit more encouraged. I think you're right in the short term about where they might be going, but somehow I look at the mentality at Brooksby as just such a tough customer and so hardworking and so much better than he looks, in my view, as a player when you watch the way he navigates matches. And Korda, I think that was heartbreaking for him to have 5-2-2 breaks and be 2 points away against Rafa, but he's on his way, and Opelka has improved. I could somehow see, not this year, but next year, I could see one of them maybe stealing a major, not being number 1 in the world, but maybe winning a major. I'm that encouraged. And we haven't seen this for so long. And Patrick, obviously, you had something to do with this, tracing it back. Talk about the pride you have in having played a role in the shaping of American tennis to where it is today, because the results were not seen right away, but you were there in what might be called the embryonic stages.
Yeah, I mean, I can't take any credit for it myself because I'm not a coach per se, but I put, I think, a really good team in place, and those coaches, led by Jose Higueras, Jay Berger, who was with the USTA as a head of men's tennis and helped me obviously in my years in Davis Cup, and countless coaches, but I think the vision we had was a good one, which was to raise the bar for just coaching in general. I mean, look, we got to be honest. The Europeans were far ahead of us in training and coaching. Now, they also have maybe better athletes playing tennis, which definitely is part of it. But I think we were able to raise the bar on what we were doing coaching-wise and training-wise. And even the naysayers out there, the coaches that say, oh, the USTA didn't do it. I still hear from these people, by the way. USTA had nothing to do with any of these players. I'm like, really? I mean, you don't even know what you're talking about. But anyway, that being said, there was a lot of, individual coaches or parents or the players themselves. They're the ones that should get the most credit. But at the same time, I really believe we put a good system in place, a good program in place that helped push these players and sort of raise the bar for them as they were 13, 14, 15, 16, and then, transitioning into the pro game. So, yeah, I am very proud of it because, I wasn't happy with the way it ended, to be honest. I talked to Jose Higueras on one of my podcasts where he really wanted to vent a lot about, some of the things he was disappointed with the way they ended, because they didn't give us the full 10, 12 years that we thought it really took. We got about 7 years out of it. But, that's politics, partly plays part of it. And I know how the USTA works. So, look, I didn't take it personally that they pushed me out. But I felt that we were able to get a lot of good things done. And I'm very happy to see what's happening with these players. I'm a little concerned about what's coming next, because they sort of cut us off a couple of years ago. But again, we're also seeing, it's interesting too. Now we're seeing, women's tennis. We were always like, we got plenty of women. Look, they're just coming like in bunches every year. Well, now, we're in a little bit of an area where, okay, where's the next great American female player? I mean, okay, Coco Gauff is there, but she's kind of stagnated a little bit. Sloane Stephens, Madison Keys seem to be maybe a little bit past our prime, although we've seen some good stuff from Keys this year. Kennan, what in the world has happened to her, who won the Australian Open, got to the finals of the French. Jennifer Brady's injured. Danielle Collins, is battling injuries, great run in Australia. So I think we have a lot of hope there. CC Bellis, who I thought could have been a, top 10 player and had just horrendous injuries, has now, been forced to retire. So I'm very optimistic on the men, and I'm a little concerned about what's coming in the pipeline for the men down the road. Although, like you said, we're going to have a good, decade or so here. And I'm a little more concerned about the women at this point.
Well, I'll end this topic by saying, you recently had Riley Opelka on, and it was really nice that Riley emphasized that you spent a ton of time and you invested a ton of time with Riley and that group, that crop of guys. So that obviously had to be, it felt good for you to hear that from someone who's in the mix of, being one of the next possibly slam champs for the U.S. So we'll move on to a different topic, but yeah, definitely proud work with all those guys, Patrick. Let's take it back a little bit. 1991, beginning of the year, Australian Open semis, the famous quote that you had. No surprise here. It's Edberg, Lendl, Becker, and McEnroe. I want you to, one, talk about that run, and two, not many people know, and correct me if I'm wrong, your first round match, you were down 2-0, I believe. The semis were the farthest thing from your mind at that point.
I'm going to let you all in on a little secret now, David. It was Steve Flink that gave me that line as I was walking into the press box.
That's why we have Steve on here, Patrick.
That's why I have Steve out. No, because Steve's been around. The funny thing about that tournament, yes, you're right. I was down 2-0 in a break in the third against Thomas Hogstedt, the Swede, who ended up, of course, having a great coaching career as well. And I remember I was wearing a hat because it was a super hot day in Australia. And I didn't like wearing hats because it always messed with my vision. So I was down 2 sets and a break in the third. Down a double break in the third. And I remember I hit a serve and the hat kind of like flew in front of my face. And I was so this hat, I just hit it, like literally like smacked the hat into the fence. And I think I was down like 15-40 in that game. Somehow I managed to hold. And the match started to turn, and it was really, really hot. And by the early in the fourth set, I could tell like he was done, like physically done. The heat got to him. So I was able to win it pretty easily the last couple of sets. But, I had spent the month before that. I was getting ready to leave New York, or, the month or so before, to go to Australia. I had no coach. I was traveling by myself. And my brother was in Hawaii, of all places, like renting a place. And he wasn't, he was in one of his sabbaticals. So, I don't know, it was a year after when was the year he got thrown out? Was that the next year or the year before? I think it was the year before.
I think it was 90. Yeah.
Yeah, it was 90. So he wasn't going back because, he had that nightmare when he got thrown out against Pernfors. So he was in Hawaii. So he said to me, Patrick, why don't you come here? You could train, here on your way to Australia. I said, great, sign me up. So I went to Hawaii, and who was there with him? It was when he was married to his first wife. So they rented like a house or something. The great speed skater, Eric Heiden. You remember him? One of the all-time great speed skaters. And he and John were good friends. So Eric Heiden would go out and train with me. Like, I didn't know anything. I was just like, whatever. But I could work hard. So he had me doing all these exercises that he would do for speed skating, which were similar to tennis, side to side and, run, sprint, all this stuff. So I did that for a couple of weeks, and then I went to Australia, and I kept doing all this stuff on my own. I went to New Zealand, played a warm-up tournament. I think I played another one in Sydney. So I was feeling very fit, very strong. And by the way, that I was one of the last players to even get in the main draw that year, because I believe I was ranked about 120, 118. So I initially didn't get straight in because the cutoff was lower, but a few players pulled out. So I got in, and lo and behold, winning that first round match in 5 sets gave me a lot of confidence in my fitness and my belief system. Now, of course, it helped that I had a good draw. I played my good buddy Jay Berger, who's now the coach of Opelka. He was a pretty highly ranked seed at the time, but he was coming off of, he had a lot of knee problems, so he wasn't quite 100%. So I beat him pretty easily in straight sets, partly because he was slightly injured. And then I think I played Woodford, who was, a good player, but I beat him pretty comfortably. And then I played Cristiano Karate in the quarterfinals. Now, he had beaten, I believe, Krajicek, who was a high seed. So it was a pretty good draw. And but that match went 5 sets against against Karate. I was up 2 sets to love, and then I lost the next 2 sets. I actually hurt my back in the 4th set. And I remember thinking like, oh man, I can't believe this. I'm going to blow this match. And I had the trainer come out at the end of the 4th set, kind of loosen me up a little bit. And I remember I believe the roof was closed. It was one of the first years, they were played with the roof. And they closed the roof, and I remember saying, okay, I'm serving first, just hold serve and try to just like sneak a break at some point. So, and, pace yourself. So sure enough, I was able to get a break like a 2-3 or something in the 5th and, somehow win it in 5. And then I played Becker in the semis. And I'll just tell you this last part of the story, which was I was up a set and I had I'd beaten Becker a couple of times. So he was the one guy out of those top players that I could have a chance against. If I played Agassi, he would destroy me every time. Michael Chang, similar players to me, just much better. But against Becker, I was a great returner. I had a chance. So I remember thinking to myself, I think I had a break point, like a 2-3 in the 2nd. And I remember thinking to myself, holy shit, I could be in the finals of the Australian Open.
That's it. And that was it.
From that point on, it was it. Like, 6-3, 6-2, 6-4, I was out.
As soon as that thought enters your mind, I've heard that from so many players.
Like,
you got to stay in the present. It's so hard to do.
Exactly.
Just a side to that, Patrick, how would you compare the performance against Boris there to what I thought was maybe an even better one at the U.S. Open in '95 in the quarters?
Yeah, I thought I played better.
That day at the Open, they're just quickly throw this in. I'd never seen you look more fiercely competitive, and you were playing off the crowd, and I thought you playing to a very high level, and I thought you actually had him quite worried there. So how do you compare that to Australia?
I think I played better in that match. The one I lost in 4 sets, and it was always my dream to have a run at the U.S. Open, right? Because it's my hometown, and it's a hard court, which was my best chance. And most of my better results in a major in singles was at the Australian Open, for whatever reason. But that year I got hot. I was also down 2 sets to love in the 3rd round of that tournament against Alexander Volkov, who unbelievably passed away a couple of years ago, which was tragic. He was the same age as me. I remember playing against him in junior tournaments in Italy, as a 15, 16-year-old. So that really hurt when I heard that he passed away. He was in his early 50s. But when I played Boris, I'll tell you this. I had a new coach at the time in that last year, a guy named Dickie Herbst, who had coached Mayotte a bit. It was kind of a friend of mine. And he was trying to get me to play more offensively because, I was a good little counterpuncher. And I remember I was practicing that all during the year, and he would have me practice with better players to try to raise my expectations. So I remember I lost the first 2 sets in that match at the Open, and I was playing really well. And it was like, 7-6, 6-4 or something like that. And I remember sitting on the change room and thinking, man, I was like, I got nothing to lose. I've been playing, trying to practice playing bigger. So why don't I just do it? I'm down 2 sets to love. I'm playing well. The guy's just better than me. So when I did that, I felt like I actually played even better. And I won the 3rd set, and I believe I lost a 4th in a tie break. And I may have even had a set point or 2 to take it to a 5th. And I would have liked my chances in the 5th. Because like you said, I got the crowd into it. It was one of those day into the night matches. So the vibe was awesome. But I was really proud of that, because I felt like I pushed myself in the middle of the match in a big, one of the biggest matches I've ever played, to play better. So although it was obviously disappointing to lose it, at the end of the day, it was, one of the matches I'm most proud of.
Thanks for sharing that. I want to stick in 1991 because something cool happened. I'm a Chicago guy, Patrick.
Yes.
1991,
yes.
It was the Volvo. It was a Volvo event, and you played I was at the tournament, not the final, but you played your brother John in the final. Briefly, how cool was that?
Well, it wasn't that cool, Dave, because we didn't like playing against each other, and John really didn't like losing to me, although he never lost to me in an official match. I did beat him in doubles a couple of times over the years, and he wouldn't talk to me for like 3 months, if I beat him in doubles. So I was the younger brother, and obviously he's Johnny Mac, so the pedigrees are a lot different. But at that time, that was when I was sort of at the peak of my playing days, and John was at the tail end of his career. So actually, from a competitive standpoint, I actually had a chance to win the match, where the other times we played, a 6-2, 6-2, 6-1, 6-2, no chance. But this time I actually had a chance to win the match. I won the first set, ended up losing 6-4 in the third, pretty fast indoor court, which, suited him well. But it was one of those matches where I actually could have won. I'd be lying to you if I said I tried to lose, because I didn't. But I would also be lying to you if I said I really wanted to win, because I really didn't in one way, because he was my older brother. I looked up to him. I knew it would hurt him more than it would help me. Like he could never have lived with himself, which he still, admits to this day. So it was, it was a good match. It was a very competitive match, and certainly one that, proud to be able to say it happened, and that we played against each other when we were both, fairly evenly matched, at least at that point in time.
That's cool that happened. I'll leave it to Steve if we want to talk about anything else that happened in 1991. I'm not going there.
Yeah, I'll go there, but before I do, just briefly talk about how difficult it was to follow in John's footsteps. I mean, here was this uniquely talented, creative, left-handed genius, and you're coming along and trying to establish yourself, and it probably wasn't even it was a challenge in life as well as tennis. But what was it like to follow in his footsteps as a player and create your own identity and accomplish what you?
I'm going to show you this picture right here. It's in my office, and if you look up real close, and you might even be able to read it. I don't know, but it says there's a little guy on the left there. Okay, I'll read it to you.
Okay.
Okay, and it says I have to look away so I can read. This was at Port Washington Tennis Academy, where we both, grew up playing, where Harry Hopman, ran it. So it says there's a picture with Lucy Hopman and all the young kids, getting a certificate. Young chap at left is Pat McEnroe, 5. Younger player at Port Washington Tennis Academy and brother of John McEnroe, nationally ranked number 7 in the boys 12s. Okay, so it just happened to be sitting here in my office. Now, why am I telling you this? Because this was something I got used to at a very young age. Okay, and I could tell you a million stories, which I do when I go give speeches, about the photographer at the National Boys 16s in Nashville, Tennessee, that just took pictures when I got upset. I was totally calm. And then when I got upset, they took pictures. It was on the front page of the paper. So I got used to it growing up, because I was a really good junior tennis player, but I wasn't my brother. And even when my brother became number 1 in the world, I was the number 1 recruit in the country when I went to Stanford. So I was a big time junior player. But was I going to be as good as my brother? Probably not. But when I graduated from Stanford, I'll tell you this last tidbit. I wasn't sure I wanted to play pro tennis. I'd had some success in doubles already on the tour while I was in college. In fact, I won the tournament in San Francisco with Jim Grab while I was still a student in college. So I already knew I could be a good doubles player. But I wasn't sure. My singles, my last couple of years of college weren't great tennis-wise. So I wasn't in a great place. And I decided to study to go to law school. In my last quarter at Stanford, I was already graduated basically because I was ahead in my classes. So I studied to take the LSATs, the law boards, to get into college. My dad, as you know, Steve, was a lawyer. My brother Mark's a lawyer. His wife's a lawyer. So there's a lot of lawyers in the McEnroe family. And I was doing really well on all the practice tests. And then the day after I graduated from Stanford, I took the law boards. Literally the day after. I remember we had this big party at me and my buddies at Stanford, and I was like, oh, geez, I got to take the LSATs tomorrow. And my mom was like a big driver behind this. Like, maybe you don't want to, maybe you should go to law school. Maybe you shouldn't be a pro tennis player. John would always say to her, Mom, shut up. Let Patrick do what he wants to do. Patrick's good enough to make it in the pros. Let him decide what he wants to do. So when I got my scores back for the law boards and I showed them to my mom, Steve and David, my mom said, son, I think you should stick with tennis. Because I didn't do great on the test. And she was like, well, you're not going to get into Harvard or Stanford Law School. So, once I made that decision, the first couple of years I was on tour were tough because I couldn't make it in singles. I wasn't making it. I was doing very well in doubles. And I probably could have had a great career. I think I could have won a lot more majors in doubles if I had just focused on doubles. But after about 2 years on the tour, I was like, I really want to try to make it in singles. So I put doubles sort of in the back seat. I got serious about my fitness. I worked hard. I trained hard. I realized I was going to have to work a lot harder, to make it on the tour. Luckily, I had a little cushion that I was making some money playing doubles, so that helped me. But that really started in 90 because, I graduated in 88 from Stanford. And 89, I won the French Open with Jim Grab in doubles. And we were one of the top doubles teams in the world. And it was sort of like end of 90 was like a reality check for me. It was like, okay, if I want to make it, I got to start, playing challengers and, grinding it out. And so that's what I did. And that helped me, I moved my ranking. I was like 500 in the world at the middle way through 1990. And then towards the last half of that year, that's when I got my ranking up to where I had a chance to get in the Australian Open. And then I did, and then, got to the semis. So I solidified my singles career for, I fluctuated between, 30 and 70, 80, whatever, for most of my career in singles over the course of the next 6-7 years. But 95 ended up being, one of my great years, and disappointing that I had, shoulder problems at the end of that year. So I was never really able to capitalize on that. The good news of my shoulder issues and surgeries was that I started my television career.
Yeah, that worked out okay.
That worked out well, but it kind of ended my playing career a little earlier than I wanted.
Patrick, you mentioned doubles. If I can, and Steve, if you want to add to that topic, go ahead.
No, I just wanted, before we moved on, I just wanted to get Patrick, you remember last year we spoke, Patrick, I was doing a piece about Connors and the 30-year anniversary of his 9.
I guess we're going there, Patrick. I guess we're going there.
That's okay. It has to happen.
I wanted to read to you and David what you said to me, Patrick, at the time, and get you to build on this a bit, or just anything you want to add to it. But you said you were up 2 sets to love and 3 love 40. You almost had him there. And you said, I remember thinking to myself midway through the 3rd set, I've got Jimmy Connors beat. And once I thought that, the wheels started to come off. I took my foot off the gas ever so slightly, and Jimmy recognized that. You just elaborate on that a little bit. And then you talked also about how hard it was. You couldn't sleep that night. Obviously, it was a very painful loss. And on the other hand, he had that spectacular run all the way to the penultimate round and lost to Courier in the semis. Just give us some additional thoughts on that, if you would, because I know it's not the most pleasant moment of your career, but it's one you are remembered for somewhat poignantly, because I think a lot of people sympathize with the fact that, the crowd, what was left of it in the wee small hours in the morning, was rooting for him.
Yeah, I still run into a lot of people, Steve, that say they were rooting for me in that match, and I was like, I didn't hear you. Nobody could hear you. But obviously, understandably, that people were rooting for Jimmy at that point. He was 39. But I think if I had played that match, 3 or 4 years later, I probably would have closed it out, because I would have had that, some more experience. And
or how about on an outside court? I know it would be in the stadium, but if you played on an outside court,
I had quite a few matches that I came back from when I was 2 sets down over the course of the next few years. So even though I lost this one, excuse me, to Jimmy, which hurt a lot, I learned from it, and it inevitably made me a better player. But for 6 months after that, I went into a tailspin. I mean, I couldn't win matches at all. And the other interesting thing about it, and I've watched some like snippets of the match, both in the first 2 sets and then later in the match. I mean, at that point, we were pretty evenly matched. It wasn't like, he was playing at a level where I probably shouldn't beat him in straight sets. You know what I mean? Like, he was playing at a high level. I was playing like a guy who was, 25, 30 in the world, something like that. I wasn't like Courier. Courier just beat the crap out of him because he was playing, at a level top 5 player. But I think Connors was playing at a really high level. And so was I. I was playing really good tennis. And again, we had practiced together, so we knew each other well. It wasn't, each game we played was pretty tight. So it wasn't really that surprising that he could turn it around when you look at just the style of play in the matchup. But definitely, I mean, he was the master. He took advantage. He saw that, maybe I had a little doubt there in the 3rd set, won the 4th set pretty easily. The 5th was pretty close. I mean, I had chances in the 5th, if I remember correctly. I think he broke me midway through the 5th, but I had chances to break back. So it was a pretty close, 6-4 final set. And interestingly, I played Jimmy, I'm going to say the following spring. And, he obviously, turned this into a whole thing where he, basically started the senior tour because of that, had that run, and he ended up, still playing on the regular tour off and on sporadically. And I played him in, of all places, Coral Springs. You remember they had the tournament on red clay.
Yeah.
On red clay in Coral Springs, I played him like in the spring, like in March. Real hot. Night match. I think it was the first round. It was the first or second round of the tournament. And obviously it was a huge crowd for that tournament, because Jimmy was playing. And I barely beat him. I mean, I beat him 7-5, 7-5 on slow red clay, which at this point in our careers, favored me because I was a lot younger. I was moving well. But my only point in telling you this is just to say, like, even when the conditions favored me, it was really close. I barely beat him in 2 sets. So, Jimmy was amazing. I had a lot of respect for him. I used to practice with him a lot, which I think drove my brother crazy because, and I think Jimmy probably practiced with me to piss off my brother, but I like to practice with Jimmy because he played, I played a more similar style to him. So for me to play with my brother was obviously great practice, but, from Jimmy, I could kind of see how to play a similar style. Obviously didn't play it as well, but that kind of style. So I always enjoyed, being able to practice with him over the years. But I think he used all of those things to his advantage, to pull out all the stops as he was, a genius at doing, to come back and win that match and then have another, couple great wins over Crixie and Harhaus and everything he did in that tournament.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Patrick. Go ahead, Steve.
Does it surprise you, Patrick, that he always says that was the best 11 days of his career? I've never fully understood that because great champions usually live by the highest of standards. And not that this wasn't a remarkable run to get to the semis, but here's a guy that won the US Open 5 times on 3 different surfaces, won Wimbledon twice, won the Australian 5 years in a row, #1. And he always alludes to that 91 Open first. To me, it's a bit surprising that he wouldn't look on one of the great triumphs that over say Bjorn.
I mean, I think that is surprising, and I think he had that great win over John at Wimbledon in '82.
Yeah,
and John should have won. Obviously his matches with Borg were legendary too. But I think why he says it, I think he said this is because this is what he wanted. This is what he wanted tennis to be. Sort of chaotic, the New York crowd, getting the crowd into it, feeding off of it, playing to the crowd. That's something, bring the street fight. He was a street fighter. I mean, that's partly what made him great. He brought that street fighter mentality to the staid old sport of tennis. And so I think that it all came together in those 11 days for him. and for tennis. I mean, the fact that, he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, reaching the semifinals of the U.S. Open. That's never happened before or since.
And Patrick, if it made it any easier on you, I guess you can give a little bit of thanks to Aaron Krickstein, because every year when there was a rain delay at the Open and they replayed a match in that run, it was most of the time was the unbelievable match versus Krickstein in the 4th round. So it maybe saved you from having to relive that tough first round match. For many years ahead.
Because Aaron had to relive it until they finally got the roof. So then they got rid of that.
Yeah. Hey, so thank you for sharing that. I do, you had mentioned doubles, and I want to transition, and you've been so kind with your time. So we want to hit a couple more things, but we can go pretty quickly. The Davis Cup, and you mentioned doubles. And I mean, my gosh, have we been spoiled? I mean, you had Johnny Mack and Peter Fleming. You had Ken Flack and Robert Seguso, Rick Leach and Jim Pugh. Of course, the Bryan brothers. We're all interested now. In my opinion, I've talked about this with Steve and many others. I think right now, Jack Sock is the best doubles player on this planet, what he's done. It's intriguing to see how they're going to use him and pair him up, because he could basically win with anybody. I know they just had Rajiv Ram with him with Columbia when they beat Columbia. You and your brother, you were obviously the captain a lot longer than your brother were, but I believe it's the only brother tandem in the U.S. to ever be both Davis Cup captains. Won the Cup in 07 with that run with Andy and James and the Bryan brothers. If you can briefly talk a little bit about that run and just how fortunate we've had with a stable of unbelievable doubles teams.
Yeah, I think, doubles has obviously always been a huge part of Davis Cup, and, in those days gets its own day, is Saturday, and usually a crucial point, to determine who wins the overall tie. And, it's not so much that particular year that I remember, but it was really the journey with those players. I think that's what made that year so special, was, losing to France in the semifinals as we did, losing to Spain with some young lefty named Rafael Nadal, who got his Davis Cup debut. And we were like, man, this guy could be pretty good in a soccer stadium in Seville in Spain, going to Russia, losing there, being close to winning it a couple of times. And those guys really committed to it. Andy Roddick had some of his great matches were losses, overseas. And I remember when we lost to France in the semifinals, we played it at Roland Garros like a couple of weeks after the U.S. Open, and he lost both his matches, but he played his ass off, and I remember him sitting in the shower, like sitting down, apologizing. And I was like, what are you apologizing for, man? You put your ass on the line. You tried your hardest, and he was an ultimate competitor. So when we were able to win it, bring even the players that didn't play as much on the team, like Marty Fish and Robbie Ginepri, who were sort of part of that era, and the Bryan brothers, and, James Blake won a tough match against Usney on day one to put us up 2-0. And then for the Bryan to clinch it, to win it, they were just automatic in their preparation for Davis Cup. Their passion for it. I remember going into the locker room with them, and I mean, they would say it almost every time we had a Davis Cup match. They would say, "Captain, this is the most important match of our lives, like right now." And you know what? These are guys that won, multiple majors, ended up winning the gold medal, but I believed them. I mean, that's like they were willing to put that pressure on themselves. That we have to deliver. They lost a couple of matches in Davis Cup, maybe 2 or 3 when I was a captain. But I mean, even the ones they lost, I mean, the only match we ever lost at home was to Croatia. If you remember that, in Carson. Yeah. Agassi played when Lubicic was on his run, playing great. He actually beat Roddick and Agassi and beat the Bryans in doubles.
Wow.
Okay, which was shocking. And I was, so upset because the court was too slow. Andre didn't like it. It was too gritty. And that was part of the reason we lost. It was the only match in 10 years we ever lost at home, was that particular match at Croatia. So just a lot of great memories of, the steps along the way. So, finally winning it was a dream come true for all of us as a team. And I think it was because we put so much into it over the course of those years to get the chance to win it and to do it at home was awesome.
So where does that rank for you, Patrick, among your career defining moments? Because that Davis Cup captaincy, I know how proud you are of that, of just having done it for a decade. But
Yeah,
the U.S. had one.
That's right up there. I mean, there's my picture of the, I'm showing you my office here. There's my picture of the team right there. And the only things on my wall right there are Davis Cup related. My first tie against Switzerland in 2001, when they had some young teenager. I don't know if you've heard of him. His name is Roger, play for them. And I remember watching this guy, and I'm thinking to myself, man, this guy is on. And in fact, David, you mentioned doubles. When he actually played doubles was when I thought, this guy's insane. Like he would cross and he would hit the volley and he'd do like this, like chop it, and the ball would die. Like he put so much English on his like cut volleys. And I was like, I've never seen a guy like wield the racket the way this guy does. This guy's phenomenal. So that's my memories, here in my little office at our tennis academy, because Davis Cup meant a lot to us. And I credit my by the way, the day we're recording this, just so everybody knows, is my dad's birthday. Okay, my dad was born on March 25th. So I'm going to try not to get emotional because you all know he passed away a few years ago. But both of our parents were very strict about a couple of things: education, sportsmanship, playing fair. I mean, of course, John, got pissed off, but always played fair. Making calls when we were kids. I follow junior tennis. I see people cheating. It just drives me crazy. The thought of us ever doing that was like, no, you lose the match. You walk off the court. If you ever do that, you don't do that. And then Davis Cup, representing your country. And those are things that really meant a lot to my parents and to us. That's, why did John go to Stanford for a year? He was already top 30 in the world. Why do you think he went, Steve?
Your parents.
Well, your parents.
Because my mom said, you're going.
Right.
You're going for a year. You've invested this. John was a great student, by the way. He's smart as a whip. I mean, you guys know that. So he went for a year, even though he was. Can you imagine someone now going to college, having just reached the semifinals of Wimbledon? That's what John did in '78.
Yeah.
So that's why that, I rate that as probably the highlight of my professional career. As you said, being the captain for 10 years, which is the longest ever, which I'm very proud of, and being able to win it with those guys and what they put into it, the dedication they put into it is what made it so special.
So great. So great. You mentioned the academy right now. I know you've been spending a lot of time at the John McEnroe Tennis Academy. I know adults can play there, but I think the academy's emphasis is really on juniors. That's where I think your biggest programs are. I was doing the research, a while ago, and I see you guys have a whole formal college placement program as well. I know you've been spending more. Have you been spending more and more time there since the pandemic, or have you always been pretty much involved helping your brother?
Well, I started here about 5 years ago. So after I left the USTA, about a year or so after I left there, I started here. So I'm going to say, I think that was, 2017-ish.
Okay.
So I've always been spending a lot of time here when I'm not on TV. This is basically my job when I'm home. They're great. They give me flexibility to do the other stuff I like to do, like my podcasts and different appearances and what have you. But I'm here, pretty much every week. And you're right. We have programs for adults. We give lessons to anybody. We have weekend court time. But the John McEnroe Tennis Academy is for kids. And that was John's mission when he started it years prior to me coming and joining him. That, from 3 in the afternoon until 8 every night, Monday through Friday, it's all about the kids who come after school. Now we do have a bigger homeschool program now. So we have kids that come during the day as well. And it's great. And like you said, the pandemic has been the biggest boom for tennis in the last, 25 years. That, all over the country, tennis is booming. We were able to reopen at our academy here in New York City, believe it or not, in early July of 2020, which was, basically nothing else was open because of the distancing, you can do in tennis naturally. And it's just recently in the last month or so that we've been able to get rid of our I've got my Laver Cup mask. I've got
The
my
masks.
ESPN mask. You know, that we actually don't have to wear them around the club now. But business is booming, and we have a great mix of kids that play in their high school team and play for fun, and kids that are nationally ranked. And we run a scholarship program we raise money for. BNP Paribas, I got to say thank you to them, because that was actually why I went to the desert, is to thank them and help them with their clients and their tournament sponsorship, because they give a huge amount of money to us every year so that we can support these high-end kids that normally wouldn't be able to afford lessons and groups and traveling to ITF tournaments and the junior tournament. So that's my way of saying thank you to them for supporting us. So we have a for-profit side and not-for-profit side, and we're very lucky. We have a great company in Sport Time that helps, run the place for us. And it's a lot of fun, and I got to tell you, one of the things I've enjoyed more than anything, about being in this tennis academy, is actually working with kids and adults that aren't very good at tennis, but they actually want to learn something and they want to improve. And I have this one girl that I give lessons to fairly regularly who is really not that good at tennis. But the smile on her face when she does something well and she improves, and I'm thinking to myself, as a coach, that's way more gratifying to me than even working, because we have a lot of really good young players here. I like working with them too. But there's something different about working with someone that they're doing it for the love of improving and trying to do something positive with their life. And that's touched me a lot these last couple of years. I love it.
Oh, it's so rewarding at all levels of the game, 100%. Look, the Holding Court podcast, I know you started it in your basement during the quarantine. It's not just for tennis fans. You have had guests involved in theater, which obviously hits close to home with you. Your wife is phenomenal in that area. You've had guests involved in politics. You did a great job with guests regarding the Novak situation, Australia, also covering the Peng Shuai situation. When you started this, I guess my only question with this is, when you started it in the pandemic, did you have an idea that you wanted to go outside of the tennis arena a little bit, or did that just naturally flow?
Well, I wanted to go outside of it initially, and I sort of went the, pseudo celebrity route of people that I'd met through the years that I knew were successful, maybe not even celebrities, but just successful in their walk of life, who like tennis, who love tennis. And then I realized I need to do ones that are just about tennis too, about what's going on in tennis. And then in the last, 6 to 9 months, I started really concentrating on some of these, issues in tennis that relate to the world, political issues, whether it's the Peng Shuai, the vaccine issue with Djokovic. And so I've started to, and I enjoy that a lot. I like to educate myself. I've had a lot of people on that educate me on the podcast, which I find enlightening and fun. So I'm trying to do a mix now of those stories, still doing the tennis stories. I had Brad Gilbert on recently and just talking about, like you guys do, talk about the tournaments, talk to individual players like Riley Opelka. But I'm really enjoying doing the ones that are, sports related, that politics sort of seems to is creeping in more and more in the world in general. Whether it's figure skating at the Olympics, or the Russian, and the Russians holding the basketball player, for the Brittany Griner story in Russia. So those sort of things really interest me. And in fact, I got a message from one of my old professors at Stanford, who I stayed in touch with over the years. His name is Jim Steyer. His brother ran for president, if you remember. And Jim has been a real voice for what gets put out online for children, and what kids see on television and all that. So he's very vocal about those issues. So we've kept in touch over the years, and he taught a couple of classes I took. He's a very popular teacher. And so he says, finally, your political science major is paying off. It only took 25, 30 years in broadcasting, and now you're starting to use it. So I'm enjoying that part of it, sort of diving into some other issues that I think are relevant to the world we live in.
Fantastic. And Patrick, go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say quickly, what strikes me, Patrick, is that about the podcast is it shows how comfortable you are in your own skin. You have this really easy, I lack of a better word again, comfortable style. You're at ease and you put your guests at ease. I speak from experience on that, and it becomes very conversational. And I notice it doesn't seem to matter what realm these people are from, whether it is the political people or the pseudo celebrities, or I don't care who it is. They all seem to be able to, I know, again, from when I was on, that you feel as if you're just having a telephone conversation. You actually forget that you're doing a podcast. Did you set out to do it that way, or because you're awfully good at it?
Well, thank you, but I feel the same way doing this with you guys. I guess I was experienced at it from being interviewed a lot as a kid, being John's brother and sort of being followed around. And in my broadcasting career, I listen. I like to listen to people. I like to learn from people. Obviously, I like to, give my own opinion when it's relevant and when it's topical. But I just enjoy talking, and I enjoy learning from people that are real experts in something that maybe I'm not an expert in. Because I've been used to my whole career, come on, talk about tennis, you're the expert. Well, I think I've learned, how to be kind of the other side, which is, okay, I like to talk to people that are the expert in something. And I try to do my homework, before I talk to anybody that comes on that's not, from the tennis world, so that I make sure I know what they're about. I watch, interviews they've done before, so I try to get a little insight into them. So I think doing your homework is the most important. And as I said, I think listening is the most important because, like you said, that's what it's about, just hearing from people and having a good time. It's not rocket science.
Fantastic. It's fantastic. And I know we can tell just hearing from your voice, not only through our conversation, but the podcast that you do, you really do enjoy it. It seeps out of you, which is great. I'll leave you with this. And Steve knows I'm a big college basketball fan. I know you just had Brad Gilbert on. You guys ended your show with some college basketball. Brad talked about his West Coast bias in Gonzaga. They lost last night. You mentioned the great job Jay Wright's doing at Villanova. The listeners can't see it, but we'll eventually put it on YouTube. I got my Kansas Jayhawks shirt. I got to get to the United Center tonight because they're playing. And something that I think you'll find interesting, Patrick, the head coach at Stanford men's basketball, I think you may know this already, is Jared Haas, who's a KU grad who played in the mid-90s, played with some phenomenal teams.
Hey, man, we would kill to have a program like Kansas at Stanford in basketball. We had a good run there when we had Mike Montgomery for a few years. And I've always been dumbfounded as to why, I would think Stanford would be a great place to go play, unlike football where you need, 50 great players, in basketball, you get 2 or 3, you can do well, like Duke, obviously, or Kansas. But I'm pulling for the, Brad Gilbert's got the West Coast. I have a little bit of that because I went to Stanford. I'd like to see UCLA win tonight. But my right-hand guy when I worked for the USTA was a guy named Tom Jacobs. I'm going to give a little shout out to him. He was a huge Kansas guy, Jayhawk guy. So he's probably as excited as you are right now about the Jayhawks. I know they're a 1 seed, but I said this to Brad and I'll say this to you guys. Don't sleep on old Jay Wright and Villanova, baby. They know how to get it done. They were impressive last night. Great team coach, great team aspect that they play. So, maybe Nova UCLA. That could be the final. I don't know if they're on the same sides, but you good luck tonight for Kansas because I think they're the favorite now that or maybe Duke too, right? I guess that's
one game at a time. One game at a time for our Jayhawks here.
He goes out with the win.
Yeah, Coach K. Yeah, we'll see. Hey, Patrick, thank you so much for your time. This was a pleasure. Steve, before we end, any closing thoughts? This was awesome, Patrick.
The closing question that we forgot to mention, and I just love to hear you talk briefly about it. Recently, Patrick, you've done a lot of stuff for CNN. You come on there sort of a guest sports analyst, and it's not just tennis. They'll have you talking about other things. You've always done your homework clearly when you've gone on there too. talk about how the enjoyment you might be getting out of that, and where it's going. Are you going to do more work for them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping to. I really love it. It's been something new and challenging for me, and like you said, similar to the podcast, but the format's obviously much tighter, and you need to do a lot of homework to be ready for just those couple of minutes, because you got to get your points across quickly. You could have anywhere from 2.5 minutes to 5 minutes or 6 minutes. So I really love doing that. Again, the challenge of doing things outside of tennis inspires me. Look, I love going on there and talking about Novak Djokovic like I did during, that whole debacle in Australia. So that's been a lot of fun. I really learned, how it works. It's at a place like CNN. So unfortunately, this small issue going on in the Ukraine has gotten in the way of not just me, but sports stories in general, understandably so. And obviously, we're not making light of what's going on there. They're the news station, and we're certainly sending our best. And a lot of people in the tennis world being affected by this. Sergei Stakowski and Dolgopolov, taking arms up to protect their country. So I mean, this is serious stuff. So we send our best to them over there. So that topic is obviously important for CNN, understandably. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun for me to dive into that world and be part of it. So I'm hoping that will continue, in tennis and other sports as well.
We'll end it there. Again, thank you so much for your time, Steve and Patrick. This was an absolute blast. Thank you both.
You guys enjoy the rest of the tournament, the Miami Open, and I appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Patrick.